Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is off today. Right now on Morning News Now, death toll rising. Ida has now claimed the lives of at least 50 people here in the Northeast, with authorities now scrambling to find those missing from widespread flash flooding. We'll take you to hard-hit New Jersey as the waters recede. And at the same time, along the Gulf Coast, a dire update for the hundreds of thousands without power this morning as a sweltering heat wave continues. The state of the virus on this Labor Day, staggering new numbers here in the U.S. More than 40 million confirmed cases and over 650,000 deaths since the start of the pandemic. The latest on the Biden administration's booster shot push as school districts across the country close their doors to in-person learning. Teaching tragedy as we approach the 20th anniversary of the deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil. Questions are being raised about how that fateful morning and the decades-long war that followed are being taught in schools. We'll take you inside America's classrooms for this complex conversation. And Broadway revival as New York's theater world comes back to life. Joe had the chance to chat with waitresses Sarah Bareilles on the other side of that COVID intermission. We'll bring you a slice of that conversation and a sneak peek at our Broadway special airing tonight right here on News Now. That is a special that you're not going to want to miss, hosted by our own Joe Fryer. Happy Labor Day, and thank you for joining us this morning. Communities across the Northeast are still digging out from Tropical Storm Ida and coming to terms with its devastation. Homes and cars were destroyed by flooding rains and tornadoes, and in all, more than 50 people were killed. In New Jersey alone, the storm is being blamed for 27 deaths, and that number could grow. Governor Phil Murphy says that 4 people are still missing. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez joins us from Manville, New Jersey. Isa, good morning. So Manville was hit particularly hard. Obviously, we can see that destruction right behind you, and President Biden is expected to visit tomorrow. Tell us, what's it like there on the ground this morning? What happened to that home behind you?
Good morning, Savannah. I mean, you can still see the wreckage all over this neighborhood as you drive by. This behind me is a home that actually exploded when the water caused a gas leak. The same thing happened to several other homes in the area, as well as a banquet hall. I want to show you here across the street another home. This is what most of the homes in this neighborhood look like right now. They were completely turned inside out by the water. The water came in, damaged everything, and residents have had to bring everything out, essentially their entire lives, now garbage on the side of the road. This neighborhood right now this morning, Savannah, is very quiet. These homes still don't have power, so few families are actually spending the night in the area at the moment. In the next couple of hours, we expect to see some families roll back in, as they have been over the last few days, trying to recover during the day whatever they can. But Savannah, these families are still very much in the thick of this recovery process.
Yeah, so Isa, tell me what homeowners are telling you about the recovery process. I mean, how are they going to put their pieces of their lives back together? We see all their belongings on the curb outside. What are they telling you about this process?
Savannah, they're overwhelmed. I mean, it's been a few days, but it still feels like they're very much in the early stages of this, and they really don't know where to go from here. They're taking it day by day and really hoping to get some more answers. Take a listen.
It gets pretty tense, especially when you're worried if you're going to get your basement, your first floor. Down here, you get your first floor, you're at like a total loss. You know, that's, for a lot of people, that could be, you know, your kids' baby pictures, your possessions, stuff that you cherish. You know, having a total loss, that's your life. It's tough to rebuild from that.
Residents here have told us that they're really hoping to get more answers on what they can do next. They're hopeful that President Biden's visit tomorrow will give them some of that guidance and hope that they're looking for. But really, something that we've heard over and over is that they feel overwhelmed by these back-to-back hits, right? You know, not only these extreme weather events, but also we're still in a pandemic. So it's really been a lot for this community. Savannah?
That's one of the most troubling things that we've seen from these extreme weather events all across the country is it's happening at the same time that people need, of course, medical attention for COVID. Now, Issa, this was one of the deadliest storms in New Jersey history, and we know that there was so much more rain all over the Northeast than was expected. It came more intensely and more quickly than people thought, but people say that they weren't warned properly, and maybe that's because we weren't forecasting it correctly. But how are leaders hoping to address that issue in the future so that people know if they need to evacuate and maybe lives could be saved?
Yeah, Savannah. So New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy came to the area over the weekend, and something that he repeated is that we have to build better, that the infrastructure here at the moment is not built to withstand these extreme weather events that are becoming more and more common. He said that he's hoping that Congress steps up and that there is legislation passed that will give states like New Jersey the resources that they need to build better and be more prepared for these events. Savannah?
Absolutely. All right. Issa Gutierrez reporting from New Jersey. Thank you so much, Issa. Now to Texas, where the impact is being felt this morning from the nation's most restrictive abortion bill. The law went into effect on Wednesday, banning all abortions after a heartbeat can be detected in the fetus, which is as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy, and that's before many women even know they're pregnant. And the ripple effects are now being felt beyond just Texas. NBC News reporter Liz McLaughlin joins us now from Austin. Good morning, Liz. So first, just tell us, what's the reaction been like to this new bill in Texas, and then what's the effect, what's the impact on neighboring states?
Savannah, women seeking these services are feeling desperate. We're already hearing some stories. For instance, one woman who is 5 weeks pregnant, so under the limit, but then tested positive for COVID, so has to quarantine for 2 weeks, unable to seek out these services from abortion providers, including the clinic behind me. We're at a Planned Parenthood clinic this morning. Another example, one woman took a medication-induced abortion that did not take, very rare, so now it's a high-risk pregnancy. So these phone lines to clinics outside of the state are almost turning into helplines. People are calling, crying, afraid, not sure what to do. Some women don't have the means or time off work to be able to travel out of the state. For instance, Trust Women's Clinic in Oklahoma usually fields about 3 to 5 calls from Texans a day. Now that number is closer to 50. Savannah.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that right there, you can understand the impact. Thank you so much. And also, we understand that some major companies in Texas are pushing back. Tell us the latest there.
So American Airlines and Silicon Laboratories have spoken out against this. Some of Texas' biggest employers, though, like AT&T, have been quiet about this. Bumble and Match, the dating companies, are both female-led and Texas-based. They've spoken out against this. And Uber and Lyft, they've set up funds so that their drivers can't be sued, or at least their legal fees will be covered, as this law really puts, except for patients can't be sued, but providers and anyone, quote, aiding and abetting, which that language is interesting, right? Because we're criminalizing in that language a constitutional right. But anyone helping someone get access to an abortion after 6 weeks can be sued, including those drivers that provide transportation. So Uber and Lyft speaking out about it, saying that their drivers will be covered, a handful of other companies, but a lot have remained quiet, some that did speak up for things like voting rights. Savannah?
Yeah, absolutely. And a reminder here, that's the big thing with this law, is that any private citizen is able to actually pursue legal action against somebody who's helping another person get that abortion. Now, Liz, what's next for this legislation, both in terms of where it goes from here and for those who are fighting against it?
You know, we've heard a lot of people speaking out. We're seeing outrage. You know, that's not necessarily direct action, but there is a court of public opinion, and that may push lawmakers to do some more as well. I just spoke to comedian Amy Schumer, who says she's not going to stop talking about this. The DOJ is seeking some action here. They might be able to sue as a violation of civil rights. Congress looking to pass some sort of federal law that could protect this. Meanwhile, people are setting up legal defense funds. And restraining orders are being issued. Planned Parenthood was able to get a restraining order that keeps at least one anti-abortion group from suing. But again, any private citizen can still do that. The constitutionality of this law is still in question.
Liz, thank you so much. Let's get a check on your morning news now weather. Janessa Webb is with us today. Hey, Janessa.
Hi, good morning, Savannah. We continue to watch a major hurricane that is brewing across the Atlantic right now. It is Hurricane Larry, and this system will continue to make its way offshore. It's really Bermuda that we are watching for, with tropical advisories put in place. Now, models are pretty much in agreement that we'll have a steer to the north and east, and it won't be a threat for the U.S., but the high surf is really going to be an issue. So we're really looking out with that storm system, but we still have over 500,000 people without power in southeast Louisiana, and we have heat concerns. Look at these heat index values. We're talking about the feel-like temperature of 103 degrees, and we had landfall over 6 days ago. Also, if you're across Southern California into the desert Southwest, we're talking about temperatures back at 120 degrees for Death Valley. So we're on another heat wave that we're seeing across that area. 17 million people impacted by the heat. Also, the waves of rain is not going to help the cleanup across southeast Louisiana into sections of the southeast. Look at some of these storm totals. This is just a cold front that's going to make its way across this area, 1 to 2 inches, but really concerned right now for New Orleans. Some isolated areas could pick up 4 to 5 inches, and that's just not something that area really needs. Also going to watch severe weather that's running across the Great Lakes into the High Plains this afternoon. Storms will continue today all the way into tomorrow afternoon from Chicago to the Ohio Valley, and it's the burst of winds that we're really going to watch across most of the mid-Atlantic into the East Coast, and then we're going to really be talking about a soggy Wednesday afternoon. So, Savannah, we have multiple storm systems, one that's in the Atlantic, a major hurricane, and then we still have heat concerns across Louisiana and the Pacific Northwest undergoing a heat wave and multiple fire danger threat throughout the week.
All right, lots going on. Janessa Webb, thank you so much for covering it all. Meanwhile, the Gulf Coast is still reeling from Ida's wrath more than a week after it crashed ashore as a Category 4 hurricane. In Louisiana, the death toll rose over the weekend, and more than 500,000 homes are still without power. NBC News correspondent Von Hilliard has the latest from New Orleans this morning.
This morning across the South, residents are reeling from Ida's devastation.
It's terrible, man. It's just so hard.
At least 17 deaths now blamed on the storm in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Louisiana's governor warning the death toll could rise.
Typically, it isn't the direct impact of the storm that kills the most people. It's post-storm activities.
While battling intense heat and humidity, hundreds of thousands in the region are still without power. Louisiana's largest electricity provider saying for some, power might not return until the end of September. Many are also facing food, water, and gas shortages.
We don't have any lights. We don't have any, drinkable water. The hardest part is just trying to get in the stores and get food for my family.
And now 7 nursing homes in Louisiana are being shut down by the state after they evacuated residents into a single unfit warehouse ahead of the storm. Of some 800 relocated seniors, 7 have now died, and 5 of the deaths have been classified as storm-related fatalities.
They were on mattresses on floors, and they had a couple days of no air condition.
In Lafitte, where there are still feet of standing water, residents are shaken to the core.
It's all my neighbors. I love these people. These people are my family, and they're all suffering. They're all suffering. There's not a person on this body that's not suffering.
Painfully slow signs of progress in a long and challenging road to recovery.
I've done this over and over again. This is the worst I've ever seen.
Our thanks to Von Hilliard for that report. Now, as the summer comes to an end, the U.S. has reached another grim milestone in the battle against COVID. Cases in the U.S. have now passed 40 million, and the number of deaths surpassed 650,000. Hospitals nationwide are seeing an average of 100,000 COVID patients a day as the Delta variant spreads, overwhelming healthcare workers. And this all comes as Americans travel for Labor Day weekend. NBC News' Guad Venegas has more.
This morning, as Americans look ahead to the fall, questions about when many adults can take a COVID booster shot, while children under 12 facing a new school year are still unable to be vaccinated at all as the COVID case count continues to rise. A staggering 40 million infections in the United States. And with COVID deaths rising in 48 states, the country has now surpassed 650,000 deaths since the start of the pandemic. As the highly contagious Delta variant drives the latest surge, the White House is preparing to extend its booster timeline. While the third shot for some of those fully vaccinated with Pfizer and Moderna was expected to be available in 2 weeks, regulators now warn Moderna likely won't make that deadline after the company's booster data was found to be inadequate. The Biden administration adamant on waiting for approval.
No one's going to get boosters until the FDA says they're approved, until the CDC Advisory Committee makes a recommendation.
This as the number of kids infected with the virus is on the rise. A new report from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Children's Hospital Association found children make up 1 in 5 new COVID cases. And between late June and mid-August, numbers from the CDC show hospitalization rates for kids and teens increased 5-fold.
We know certainly more children are getting infected, and therefore more are getting hospitalized.
COVID put then 4-year-old Lincoln in the hospital for a week last March.
I don't feel so good.
I know you don't feel so good.
His mother, Anna, stayed at his bedside as his condition worsened.
I remember the moments that he said, "Mom, I just don't feel good. I don't think I'm going to go home." That's the thing that nobody wants to hear their 4-year-old say.
Luckily, Lincoln's condition improved, but he would have to spend 3 more weeks on oxygen.
I just think that people need to know that this is possible.
Now, with the Moderna booster, Dr. Fauci has said it could take a few more weeks, but the White House has said that as soon as they have it, they would be ready to roll it out immediately, Savannah.
Guad Venegas, just heartbreaking to hear that account of little Lincoln. Thank you so much, though, Guad. Now let's now bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel for more on the latest COVID news. Dr. Patel, good morning. It's always great to have you. Thank you for spending this Labor Day morning with us. So let's start with those booster shots. So we just heard how the rollout for Moderna shots may be delayed. What does this mean for those looking to get booster shots? What kind of information is the FDA looking to approve them? And you know, I mean, if it's really only Pfizer, that's only a certain set of people who got that in their first and second doses. So what does this really mean? What's the impact?
Yes, Savannah, there's millions of Americans, in addition to those who received Johnson & Johnson, now Moderna recipients who are not going to be able to receive boosters on September 20th. Savannah, it has to do with how Moderna filed their application for their booster shot. They used a reduced dose from their first and second shots. This is in contrast to what Pfizer did, which is basically file for their booster to be exactly like doses 1 and 2, making it a little bit more straightforward for the FDA. So I do think that it will be several weeks, not months. But if you had received Moderna and you're ready to go on September 20th, you're going to have to wait a little longer.
Now let's talk about kids and what's going on with COVID there. I mean, we saw little Lincoln so sick on oxygen for weeks. We also heard Guad tell us that 1,000 schools have been forced to close across the country since the school year began because of COVID. First, let's play some sound from Dr. Fauci commenting on children being vaccinated from just yesterday.
The Delta variant, as opposed to the Alpha variant, is much, much more transmissible. Many more people, including children, are getting infected. You'll get more children infected. In fact, when they get infected, just on a pure basis of the relative number of people that will actually get into the hospital, you're going to wind up seeing more children in the hospital.
So, Dr. Patel, will we see more variants as more children become hospitalized and there's just that more spread that we know is leading to these variants? And then also, with as little as it feels that we know about COVID and kids, what do we know about their risk for lifelong disabilities or issues after they contract COVID?
Yeah, great questions. On the variants point, what we know right now is that what we're seeing in children and adults is Delta, Delta, Delta. So we will not likely see other variants causing infections in children in this surge. Future ones remain to be determined, Savannah, which I think is important to remember. Second, to your point about kind of long COVID or longer term lifetime symptoms, those numbers are increasing. We are starting to get more and more percentages, anywhere as high as 20 to 25% of children who are having symptoms or problems after their initial COVID infections. It does speak to the point that you're making, that we do need to worry not just about those who are hospitalized, but even those who have mild infections, because they have also been shown to sometimes have these long symptoms. Something that I think doctors of all types are going to have to look out for, because symptoms of long COVID can be incredibly diverse.
Absolutely. That's something that I still feel like there's so much to learn there, and especially it's concerning with kids. Finally, Dr. Patel, let's talk about what could be ahead for us. So this weekend sort of considered to be the unofficial end of summer. Of course, today's Labor Day. So now with the Delta variant surging, what do you expect to see come fall and winter? I mean, in surges past, these were the times of real concern, but we're already kind of in a time of real concern. Are we prepared to handle colder months after the summer?
Yeah, great question. Look, we know that this is a virus that has an affinity for colder months, because when it's less humid, it has the ability to kind of stick around and be aerosolized a little bit more easily. So we do worry about the fall and winter, especially with a flu season. We got away with a relatively low flu season last year, Savannah. I don't know if we'll be as lucky, because we're back out working, we're back in school. So I do think that we will have to have more and more people vaccinated. The more people in the next several months that we can get vaccinated, the better our winter season will be. I do think it'll be better than last year. That's good news. But how good it'll be will depend on our actions in the next several weeks to get everyone vaccinated.
That is a little bit of good news as we head into the fall. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much, and thank you for spending this unofficial beginning of fall with us. Have a good one. Now, two hot-button topics are dominating politics right now. Americans are divided over the COVID vaccine. A governor of one state says it is time to have a tough talk with loved ones about taking the shot, while another governor is placing the blame on bad messaging. At the same time, the battle is growing over that abortion law in Texas. Here's a look at both in this week's Meet the Press Compressed.
We are well past, I think, all across America, the populations that are going to listen to a government official and take the vaccine because of it. We're probably past even the point where a local official, a pastor, or others. Where I think we're at is where people are going to have to break that Thanksgiving dinner rule. They're going to have to call or go see that person they love and care about that is unvaccinated. And they're going to have to put their relationship with that person on the line, because they've never been at greater risk. And I think it's that type of caring and the person who is willing to do that and to make that sacrifice that will finally get through to those that are not vaccinated.
We're getting some mixed messagings out of the administration, out of the CDC, the FDA, and the White House, and we need clear guidance on these booster shots, because it undermines the credibility of it. And so they came out with I guess they slipped and pre-leaked a announcement about booster shots with all three vaccines, and then had to backtrack it and say you can only use Pfizer. What about the people that took J&J? What about the people that took Moderna? They haven't messaged properly about how to take care of these breakthrough infections. So I think the messaging was not clear with either administration.
This law that the Supreme Court blessed, and you can try to dress it up and put a bow on it, but they blessed a law that embraces vigilantism, that embraces the most extreme position. I really think they've gone too far, and I will not accept both sides on this. This is one party that is doing this, not both parties. This is not the place for, both sides are a problem. No, one side is a problem. I got reelected because of an extreme position on abortion. I believe a lot of Democrats will get elected over this.
It's bad policy and it's bad law. And if Republicans are going to try and be Todd Aiken Republicans, Claire is right, they will not succeed. But we have a lot more Larry Hogans, people like Jamie Herrera Butler, who's pro-life and is the leader on helping women with tough pregnancies and kids who have disabilities. And that's the kind of pro-life community that I've always worked with. And I think that's the one that needs to stand up now.
Coming up, the Afghan refugee crisis now making its way south into neighboring Pakistan. The latest from the embattled region as Afghanistan's economy teeters on the brink of collapse. That's after the break. Welcome back. Let's get to the latest on Afghanistan. The Taliban says it has captured the last remaining area held by opposition forces. But the National Resistance Front has called those claims false, saying forces are still present and continuing the fight. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from neighboring Pakistan. Molly, good morning. So yesterday, the resistance leader said he was open to peace talks. Today, the Taliban claims it is in control of that final process. What's the latest here? What are both sides saying?
Hey, guys, good morning. That's right. So, look, first off, it is really hard to tell. And there have been a lot of he said, she said, back and forth in the last couple of days. We have seen very fierce fighting in the Panjshir district. And the Taliban announced today, so this is what they announced, Savannah, Panjshir province was totally taken over. Some of the insurgents were killed while others fled. They also said we guaranteed to the residents there would be no retaliation. That is something we're hearing from the Taliban over the last couple of days, over the last couple of weeks, that there will be no retaliation if you supported the resistance, if you supported the Afghan army. Now, Savannah, what we're hearing from the resistance front is that their forces are present in all strategic positions across the valley, saying they will continue to fight. And again, Savannah, it's so hard to get reliable information. There are no reporters in Panjshir. We are trying to get information from people who are there to get a clearer picture, but that is where it stands right now.
Now, Molly, of course, one of the big questions that's been going on is how are Afghans, especially our allies or Americans who are still in the country, going to get out of the country now that the airport has been shut down and all other countries' forces have left? Now, thousands of Afghan refugees are fleeing towards Pakistan, where you are. What's the situation like at the border? How are they coping? What's being done to help people? And are people actually getting out of Afghanistan there?
Yeah, Savannah, the volume's really low, but I think you're asking about refugees coming here. And of course, look, we know that refugees, that Americans, that people with SIVs are no longer getting out of the airport. Of course, the other options are the land borders, of which Pakistan is one of them. Now, speaking with the UNHCR, Pakistan is only letting in people with all of the documentation. So with a visa to Pakistan, with an SIV visa, Afghan IDs from Kandahar, there's a special dispensation for families who've been separated. So that's a separate category. And then people, Savannah, who are really, really sick. So the only Afghans really who are getting through the border who are refugees who don't have any documentation, have serious medical issues. Now, there are two main border crossings we've been watching. There's Torkham border crossing. It's basically directly across from Kabul. Essentially, the pictures we've seen out of Torkham, just commercial trucks. So the trade is going back and forth, but really not a lot of people, just a couple of hundred people in the last several days. But UNHCR says the Shaman border crossing is much more active. And that's where we saw pictures last week at Spin Bulldog of a lot of people kind of crowding the border, really kind of tense scenes right there. And that's because really people aren't coming across if they don't have the paperwork. Now, UNHCR says about 6,000 people, and that's a very rough estimate, came across in recent days. But this is a long border. And one of the things, Savannah, that we're going to try to do in the next couple of days in Pakistan, we are going to go to the border, but we're also going to try to figure out if people are coming kind of what the UNHCR calls irregular crossings. So this is a long border. It's a mountainous region. Of course, there are specific formal crossings, but there's a lot of ways to get over the borders, a lot of ways to get over the border, not through the official channels. Savannah?
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you so much. We'll be looking for that reporting from Pakistan over the next few days. Now, in addition to the refugee crisis, the turmoil in Afghanistan has left the country facing a severe economic crisis, with banks shuttered and food prices soaring. NBC News Now anchor Allison Morris has more.
The Taliban celebrating as American forces left Afghanistan this week. The militant group now charged with stabilizing one of the world's most fragile economies.
There's a real risk that the economic troubles in Afghanistan will turn into a full-on meltdown, which could spark a humanitarian crisis, waves of migrants leaving Afghanistan for neighboring countries and probably onwards to Europe, and could destabilize South Asia, and nobody wants that.
So why is Afghanistan's economy so fragile? Well, for starters, it's long depended on foreign cash reserves. According to the World Bank, the country got more than $4 billion in international development aid in 2019, about a fifth of its current total economic output. Washington now closing off its support pipeline to the Taliban, freezing access to almost $9 billion in cash reserves. Other major Western governments also plan to stop sending aid, while the International Monetary Fund is putting a hold on payments. one positive for the Afghan people. Western Union's reportedly operating there again after a weeks-long stoppage, reopening a key source of financing from relatives and friends outside the country. Meanwhile, though, the Afghan banking system is on the brink of collapse. Many lenders closed for weeks while the cash in ATMs is drying up. The Taliban now limiting bank withdrawals to just $200 a week. All of this contributing to a sharp fall in the Afghan currency. Prices on everything from food to fuel already beginning to rise. Afghanistan was already dealing with a dire food shortage, according to the United Nations. A third of Afghans were facing hunger even before the Taliban came back to power.
There is going to be a lot of preparation to do to improve the humanitarian situation before winter in what is a very poor country with harsh conditions. And we'll absolutely need the coordination of aid organizations.
The Taliban trying to boost its foreign support, promising to be more inclusive. But many governments, including the U.S., are concerned about the group's human rights record, particularly its treatment of women.
Let me be clear. We'll continue to support the Afghan people through diplomacy, international influence, and humanitarian aid. We'll continue to push for regional diplomacy engagement to prevent violence and instability. We'll continue to speak out for the basic rights of the Afghan people, especially women and girls, as we speak out for women and girls all around the globe. And I've been clear that human rights will be the center of our foreign policy.
All of this uncertainty plus drought, COVID, and ISIS threatening to throw Afghanistan into an even more severe economic crisis.
Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner joins me now. Hi, Matt. Good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Well, let's start things off today in the African nation of Guinea, where actually yesterday soldiers staged what appeared to be a military coup, detaining the president, dissolving the government, and so on. This situation, of course, still developing. It's not immediately clear how much of the military is involved in this apparent plot, and Guinea's president has been in power for more than a decade. So definitely a dramatic situation, one to keep an eye on. Moving along now to Switzerland, on Saturday, tens of thousands took to the streets to protest the legalization of same-sex marriage in that country. Swiss voters are set to take part in a national referendum on this very question on September 26th. Those who took part in the protest, some of them claimed that Switzerland's current legislation, which allows civil unions but not marriage and all the rights that come with that, is sufficient at the moment. Finally, we go to Brazil, where health officials walked onto the field to stop play in a World Cup qualifier match. Now, this was a game between Brazil and Argentina, and Brazilian officials said that 3 of Argentina's players had allegedly broken quarantine rules by failing to report that they had quite recently been in the United Kingdom, which under current Brazilian regulations would require a 14-day quarantine. Savannah?
All right. I'm sure a lot of fans were not happy to see that. Matt, thank you so much. Coming up, teaching tragedy, how America's schools are educating the next generation on the events and aftermath of September 11th. 20 years later, you're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back with the Good Talker. Howard University's College of Fine Arts has a new official name, the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts, after the Black Panther star, who is an alumnus of the historically black university. Boseman died last year at just 43 years old. The university says when he was a student, he led a protest against absorbing the College of Fine Arts into a larger College of Arts and Sciences. The Fine Arts School was restored to its independent status in 2018. And of course now bears his name, which is very cool. All right, now to the unsolved double murder of a mother and son in South Carolina, making headlines after another member of the well-known family was shot over the weekend. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck joins us now with the latest on this and details on the case. Katie, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. It's a case that has gripped the state for months. The wife and son of prominent attorney Alex Murdaugh discovered dead on the family property. Now, Alex Murdaugh himself is recovering after a stunning twist in this mystery.
A shocking new twist this morning in the case of a high-profile family at the center of an unsolved murder mystery. Prominent South Carolina attorney Alex Murdaugh is now recovering after being shot this weekend. It's the latest in a string of disturbing events, coming just 3 months after the double murder of Murdaugh's wife and son. Many in the area closely following the case. The family is legendary in South Carolina, with its members previously serving as the region's top prosecutor for generations. On Saturday, Murdaugh pulled his car over to change a flat tire, according to a family friend, when a pickup truck drove by, turned around, and approached again. Seconds later, someone inside opened fire. Authorities say Murdaugh called 911 and was treated for a superficial gunshot wound to the head. South Carolina police are still investigating the June murder of his wife and son.
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am, they're on the ground out at my kennels.
Alex Murdaugh came home to his family estate on June 7th to discover his wife Maggie and their son Paul fatally shot near the dog kennels on their family property. Alex Murdaugh's brother speaking out shortly after the murders.
But the person that did this is out there.
The Murdaugh family has offered a $100,000 reward for information. Still, no arrests have been made.
He is presumed innocent.
At the time of his death, 22-year-old Paul Murdaugh had pleaded not guilty and was awaiting trial on 3 charges of boating under the influence, related to a 2019 crash that left a 19-year-old woman dead. The family's power in the state sparked questions about whether Alex intervened in the boat crash case to protect his son, claims the family denies. After the murders, the charges were dropped. Now, as Alex recovers in a Savannah hospital, Murdaugh's attorney tells NBC News it makes you wonder what the hell is going on, adding it seems like someone's gunning for the family.
Police are not releasing any information at this time about possible leads, suspects, or arrests. They say the investigation is ongoing. As for Alex Murdaugh, family members say he is expected to recover, but he's asking for privacy at this very difficult time. Savannah.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. Now, this week, the nation pauses to remember what happened 2 decades ago when nearly 3,000 people died in the September 11th terror attacks. NBC News education correspondent Rahima Ellis takes a look at how the tragedy is being taught in schools to students who were not even alive when it happened.
We were all still in the building when the first tower fell.
Just 4 blocks from Ground Zero, Annie Tom still teaches English at Stuyvesant High School. She and her former students wrote a play called With Their Eyes, based on what they witnessed that day. Now it's a tool for others to teach their students about 9/11.
Is there any advice you would give to a teacher who's struggling to teach the story of 9/11?
It's important for us to give our students the credit and trust them that they're able to have complex conversations.
Far from the site of the attack, Billie Jean Fulton teaches U.S. history in a Mississippi high school. Her memories of 9/11 are also still vivid.
And I remember walking back to my classroom and crying and wondering, it even still brings tears to my eyes today, how I was going to explain that to the kids that were coming into my next block class.
A difficult conversation then, even more difficult now, with students born after that day.
At this time, can you feel the confusion?
Fulton creates a 9/11 lesson plan that far exceeds the state requirement.
9/11 is probably going to take up a page or 2, where Vietnam will usually have a chapter.
And a page and a half for 9/11?
Well, you know, I think we're still really writing the history of 9/11.
It's a reality in school districts nationwide. A recent study of U.S. curriculum shows 25 states mention the attacks, 9 mention terrorism or the war on terror, 16 didn't mention 9/11 at all. Experts say age matters when teaching children about traumatic events, so students are not just frightened, but informed.
The younger they are, the more general you become. It's more about egocentric, am I going to be safe? Can you protect me? Those kind of lessons. The best teachers have a pulse on their class, and they adjust the lesson to fit where the students are.
Raise your hand if you learned something new about 9/11.
These students know more now than ever because of how Fulton teaches, using personal stories
Jules, this is Ryan. Lives on an airplane that's been hijacked.
And accounts of bravery.
All those firefighters going into that building, 347 of them won't make it out.
It's different from how I imagined it. Like, I understood that people died, but see the buildings, the people, the planes, it was devastating.
With these lessons, both Thomas and Fulton,
what's your feeling about what you've seen?
Aim to make the 2,977 people who died that day more than just a number. You think an emotional connection is one of the most powerful ways to connect your students to history?
Absolutely. They've got to have some kind of feeling about it. And the best way to get them engaged is emotionally.
Do you think you'll ever forget this lesson?
You don't forget. This is something you can't forget. You shouldn't forget.
But first, someone has to teach you why it's important to remember.
We will have a lot more this week leading up to that 20th anniversary. Now coming up, staying put through a hurricane out of necessity rather than by choice. A closer look at why some families along the Gulf Coast can't afford to evacuate from a major storm. That's up next. This morning, millions of jobless Americans across 26 states will lose federal unemployment benefits as several COVID relief programs officially expire. Now, these were originally passed back in March 2020 and then extended twice by Congress. The benefits include a $300 federal boost to state unemployment pay, which an estimated 3 million Americans will now lose. 7.5 million will be kicked off unemployment altogether. Now, though today marks the official end date due to a quirk of the calendar, those benefits have actually already ended. That's because unemployment is claimed by the week, meaning jobless workers were only able to claim up until this weekend. Now, while many families are returning home to assess the damage from Hurricane Ida, some people never got the chance to leave. NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez takes a look at how difficult it can be to evacuate before a hurricane.
We just don't have the funds. We don't have the funds to stay anywhere else. We're barely making it trying to get some gas.
Ana Ramos was born and raised in Kenner, Louisiana, 15 minutes from downtown New Orleans.
I've been through all the hurricanes possible. For Hurricane Gustav, I had to evacuate pregnant, almost giving birth.
Wanting to evacuate before Hurricane Ida hit and being able to are two different situations.
Once we tried to book, we saw the cheapest I found was in Panama City, Florida, and it was $184 a night.
Something her family couldn't afford for a night, much less weeks if they couldn't get back home. Ana's story isn't unique.
My family, my pets, everybody is here, so, and where are we going to go? I mean, hotel rooms are full, houses are full.
I got a backpack with a few clothes in it in case I had to run out just somewhere, but you know what? I didn't know where I wound up at.
But oftentimes, people who decide to stay during a dangerous hurricane get shamed.
The shaming and the sometimes very bad assumptions about why people behave in certain ways comes up after every single evacuation.
Law professor Michelle Dickerson says evacuation can be a complicated logistical undertaking that will
almost always lead back to money, resources, and to some extent, social capital. You have to have a lot of things that low-income and marginalized communities often don't have.
A lot goes into an evacuation decision.
I have an old car. My car is a 2008. So just mechanically, I mean, we keep up with it, but is it going to be able to get where we need to go?
And with a bad case of arthritis.
Houston from Kenner is about 5 or 6 hours. Plus you have to add on 3 or 4 hours of travel because of traffic. I would not be able to travel so long like that.
Can your household afford lost wages from not showing up to work potentially for weeks? Are you caring for a critically ill loved one who can't move? Are you healthy enough to travel? Do you have pets? Do you have reliable transportation? Do you have enough money for gas, food, a hotel room?
When we say, well, why didn't they just evacuate? If all of those pieces aren't in place, the logistics of the evacuation process won't work.
Even the time of the month a hurricane hits can affect a person's decision to evacuate.
So one of the awful things that we've seen with Katrina, with Harvey, and now with Ida, they all hit at the end of the month. When people that live sort of from paycheck to paycheck, their paycheck may not hit again until today. Well, they needed to have evacuated several days ago, but if the money hasn't hit, they don't have the money to pay to evacuate.
At the end of the day, even if someone may want to evacuate, the decision may already be made for them.
And coming up, a show-stopping return for Waitress on Broadway, the musical's record-breaking post-COVID performance, and a sneak peek at Joe's interview with songwriter and star Sara Bareilles up next. We want to pay tribute to a beloved member of our family here at NBC News. Today, Weatherman Willard Scott died on Saturday at age 87. He made his colleagues at NBC laugh for more than 3 decades and is now being fondly remembered.
Savannah, Willard Scott died on Saturday, and even if you never met him, he was the kind of guy that you felt like you knew. He brought genuine joy to his viewers during his more than 60 years on television.
Here's what's happening in your world this morning.
Willard Scott knew the weather, but it was his wit and charm that put him on the map.
I don't do this for everybody. I want you to. Let's just see something here.
He began his broadcasting career in 1950 at our NBC station in Washington, WRC.
And sunshine will come in here sometime.
Willard joined Today in 1980.
The newest member, old Uncle Willard, the newest member of the Today family.
And he's kept us laughing ever since.
Get your own duck, Gumble. I told you to go before we got on the bus. This is sort of like a big snail, but inside there's a panther. How do you smoke that cigar and play the trumpet at the same time?
He traveled the world.
I mean, somewhere out in the Saudi desert. This is spectacular.
Becoming a household name.
Holy mackerel. Can you believe this?
I came by to see if you wanted to jog with me today.
I'm ready.
Willard even stole a kiss from First Lady Barbara Bush during the 1989 inaugural parade.
How about that? I've been kissed for the best.
In 2015, Today celebrated his retirement.
I would not be here without you. I love you so much.
Well, I appreciate that. Are you going to buy me dinner?
Since his passing, tributes pouring in. Al Roker writing of his mentor, there will never be anyone quite like him. Katie Couric saying she's heartbroken. Willard was as warm and loving and generous off camera as he was on. And Andrea Mitchell calling Willard a ray of sunshine no matter what the weather or how grim the news. For years, Willard helped families mark a milestone.
Happy 100th birthday. 102. Happy birthday, sir. Let's check a birthday this morning.
And though he didn't make it to 100, Smuckers put his face on one of their jars, writing, "May the smiles that he brought to others live on, well beyond 100 years."
So that's all we have time for right now. Thank you, Clyde. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Here you go. Thank you very much.
A legend who always seemed to have a smile on his face.
It's a tough job, but somebody had to do it.
And Savannah, we all felt like we grew up with Willard Scott, right? And I can tell you, even my own family has a special memory because he announced my great-grandmother's 100th birthday on television. He was just the kind of guy that everyone tuned in for. Savannah?
Oh, that is so true, and what a wonderful tribute. Now, Broadway is back with a bang. According to Playbill, the Friday night performance of the musical Waitress set a single-night record at the Ethel Barrymore Theater, bringing in nearly $200,000. And our own Joe Fryer sat down with the show's songwriter and star Sara Bareilles to talk about her return to the stage.
How does it feel to be back on a Broadway stage?
I mean, it's been so many things. It's been so intense, deeply emotional, very surreal, completely exciting and joyful. And then I cannot get over how quickly it starts to feel just like, we're back.
I know it's cliche to say it's like riding a bike, but was it in some way like you just picked right up where you left off?
It's like riding a bike with a mask, being vaccinated. You know what I mean? It's just like that.
For you, was it a relief to know everyone has to be vaccinated?
Yes, 1,000%. To me, I just feel like this is a no-brainer. We're a progressive industry, and we have to like hold these high standards.
And you can hear much more from Sarah Bareilles, as well as stars of Moulin Rouge, Hadestown, and more during our Return to Broadway special that Joe's hosting. That's tonight at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on NBC News Now. And then you get a little dose of Joe today, since we missed him this morning. Thank you for spending your Labor Day morning with us. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.